resolving infectious inflammation by targeting the host response. Definitions. Inflammation is part of the complex biological response of body tissues to harmful stimuli, such as pathogens, damaged cells, or irritants. Inflammation is a protective response that involves immune cells, blood vessels, and molecular mediators. The purpose of inflammation is to eliminate the initial cause of cell injury, clear out necrotic cells and tissue damage from the regional insult and the inflammatory process, and to initiate tissue repair.
Inflammation is the protective reaction of vascularized tissue to local injury. Acute inflammation is the early, almost immediate reaction of tissue to the injury, and it is the first phase of wound healing. Acute inflammation can be triggered by cell or tissue damage or by the presence of dead cells or noxious agents such as bacteria. Acute inflammation typically occurs before the immune response becomes established and aims primarily at removing the injury-causing agent and limiting the extent of tissue damage. Acute inflammation occurs in two overlapping stages, vascular and cellular. In the vascular stage, arterioles and venules near the site of injury constrict briefly, then dilate. Dilation promotes congestion, while an accompanying increase in capillary permeability leads to the movement of fluid into the affected tissue, resulting in the 5 classic signs of inflammation: redness, swelling, heat, pain, and loss of function. As fluid leaves the capillaries, the blood remaining in circulation becomes more viscous, it flows more slowly, and clotting occurs. The cellular stage of acute inflammation is initiated by the movement of phagocytic white blood cells, or leukocytes, into the area of injury. The leukocytes begin to adhere to the vessel wall, and then, in a process called emigration, squeeze through the wall and move into the inflamed tissue.
Pros and cons. Pros. Accelerate the resolution of the inflammation and increase survival. In the cons, not yet tested in humans, only in rats, and it can be very expensive.
E. coli are a large and diverse group of bacteria. Although most strains of E. coli are harmless, others can make people sick. Some kinds of E. coli can cause diarrhea, while others cause urinary tract infections, respiratory illness and pneumonia, and other illnesses. Still, other kinds of E. coli are used as markers for water contamination. Some kinds of E. coli cause disease by making a toxin called Shiga toxin. The bacteria that make these toxins are called Shiga toxin-producing E. coli, or STEC for short. The most commonly identified of these in North America is E. coli 0157H7. When you hear news reports about outbreaks of E. coli infections, they are usually talking about E. coli 0157. In addition to E. coli 0157, many other kinds can cause disease.
Application in medicine. Newly discovered anti-inflammatory molecules, Resolvins, accelerate the resolution of inflammation in mice infected with E. coli and increase their survival.
Dr. Roizen, we hear so much about inflammation. It's the culprit in so many things, but what exactly is it?
Inflammation is what we call it's a very interesting question because when you say what causes it, that's much easier than what it is.
Okay.
What inflammation really is in the body is an increase in white cells or an increase in what you might call as metabolic activity where it doesn't belong. But in most cases in humans, we mean there is a white cell activity, there is a immune activity, there's a infection or a fighting activity against a foreign invader or perceived foreign invader. So, for example, if you don't floss your teeth, you will develop inflammation between the teeth and in the gums because of bacteria, and your white cells will fight it, and that fight actually has some innocent bystanders along with it, the gum tissue, and that destroys some of the gum tissue. So it's that war that's going on between the two sides. But that also sets up, we think, another interesting thing. When you have that reaction, you set up an immune reaction that attacks the inner lining of your arteries, causing inflammation in your arteries. So gum disease causes that attack in the arteries where some part of your immune system is attacking your arteries that doesn't normal. Well, it's that attack that we call inflammation.
Issue in Ecuador. E. coli is frequently found in Ecuador because it causes a lot of illnesses in our country. That is why finding a cure is necessary.
Hello, my name is Winnie Messens. I'm a scientist working at EFSA in the field of biological hazards. Today, I will talk to you about Escherichia coli or E. coli. E. coli are common bacteria in the gut of humans and warm-blooded animals. In fact, they are part of our normal bacterial flora. Most E. coli strains have beneficial functions. For example, they may prevent the establishment of harmful bacteria in our intestine. However, there are also pathogenic E. coli. This means that these can cause human illness. And among these pathogenic E. coli is one group of E. coli strains that are capable of producing toxins. And this group of strains is known as virocytotoxin-producing E. coli or Shiga toxin-producing E. coli, better known as VTEC or STEC. Infection in humans with VTEC usually leads to mild to bloody diarrhea. However, also more severe complications can occur, which may potentially even lead to kidney failure. In 2011, 9,500 human cases were reported in the European Union, of which 56 death cases. 2011, however, was an exceptional year. You may remember the many news reports about a large outbreak in Germany, which was caused by fenugreek seeds imported from Egypt. The strain that caused this outbreak was a rare strain. People usually get infected by consumption of contaminated food, contaminated water, or also may contract the infection by contact with infected animals and close contact with infected humans. Now in Europe, among animals and foodstuffs, VTEC was most commonly found in cattle and also in bovine meat. VTEC was also found on vegetables and fruits and also on dairy products made from raw milk. Now, what is the role of EFSA in order to protect you from this pathogenic VTEC? EFSA monitors the presence of these bacteria in different foods. Also, EFSA conducts some investigations, like investigating which VTEC strains are pathogenic to humans, which was the source of an outbreak, and also investigating the role played by different foods in causing human disease. Now, what can you do in order to protect yourself from these pathogens? It is advised that you refrigerate your foods. It is also advised to wash your hands and also the vegetables and fruits and the cutting boards and knives when preparing food. And at last, also cook your meat, in particular minced meat, thoroughly.
Finally, the conclusions. This is a new discovery and it is very important to humanity because it can help cure many illnesses caused by this bacteria.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report.
German health officials announced on June 10th that bean sprouts were the cause of Europe's deadly outbreak of E. coli bacteria. E. coli infections killed at least 30 people since late May. 3,000 others were sickened. Most of the victims were in Germany. After the announcement, Russia said it will lift its ban on European Union vegetables in return for EU safety guarantees. At first, German officials suggested that cucumbers from Spain were to blame. Russia and other countries quickly banned vegetable imports from Spain and other European countries. The Spanish agriculture minister, Rosa Aguilar, demanded that Germany pay for her country's losses. John Dalli of Malta is the European Union's Commissioner for Health and Consumer Policy. He said a rush to judgment spreads unjustified fears in the population all over Europe and creates problems for our food producers selling products in the EU and outside of the EU. Some critics accused Russia of using the issue to try to help its effort to join the World Trade Organization. Russia is the largest economy without membership in the WTO. EU Farm Commissioner Dacian Ciolos proposed giving European farmers $220 million in aid. The goal was to help European farmers recover at least 50% of their losses. By June 8th, Mr. Ciolos had raised the amount to over $300 million. The E. coli outbreak was not the only issue troubling Europe. European governments and the International Monetary Fund were considering as much as $65 billion in new loans to Greece. Some officials admitted that earlier rescue loans were not enough. Thousands of government workers protested spending cuts approved by the Greek cabinet to reduce budget deficits. Separately, French Finance Minister Christine Lagarde continued her campaign to become the next head of the IMF. She visited China after traveling to India. Mexican Central Bank Chief Agustin Carstens was seeking to become the first non-European to lead the international lender.